You get paid on the value that you bring to the market.
If you're not moving forward in life, you're moving backwards. This is Ace and Jamie, and this is Breakpoint Podcast.
Our goal is to create and deliver content that evokes a change of spirit and heart, seeking out messages that will relate and inspire.
Stories and experiences of people and their breakpoint in life.
Little rough around the edges, completely unhinged, and wildly compassionate.
We bring you Breakpoint Podcast.
Everybody needs to learn this topic. And if you don't know, you'll find out today. And it's called cash flow quadrants. And this is a term that's been coined back in the 90s by a gentleman, Robert Kiyosaki. He came up with this. You guys probably heard or maybe read the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He followed that up with another book called Cash Flow Quadrants because it was so important. So the point of this isn't so much just to teach the quadrants, but to give you guys a concept of where you're at today so you can put yourself in a better position to win. Because if you're like me and my wife, Jamie, maybe you can relate. You were taught to go to school, get a good job, work 50, 60 years, and hopefully collect Social Security or get some sort of pension. And if you're living in the year 2020 like we are, you know a lot of that isn't going to happen. You know Social Security is going away. If you were someone who was born in the 2000s, it's probably not going to be there. 401ks aren't what they're cracked up to be in most cases, and pensions for many people don't even exist. So you need to really kind of set yourself up to win here. So we were raised in what's called the E quadrant, and as you can see, we're putting the slide up. E quadrant stands for employee. So that means you're in that W-2 income bracket, which you're in the highest tax bracket, as many of you may know. How many of us, when you get that check, you're like, where's all my money going? The government's taking it from you. So it's a crazy position to be in. But the more money you make, for anybody that wants to make that high six-figure income, that $100,000 marker, it just means the government taxes you more. And the more you make, the more they take, is the way it kind of works out. So being a person who has a job and is employed by somebody, it's not a nice way of saying it, but someone's basically renting you for 40 to 60 hours a week. And they're determining your value that you're bringing to their workplace and deciding to pay you that 50, 60, 100 grand, whatever it is that you're getting paid. And not that having a job's a bad thing, but setting yourself up to win, you will need to create some sort of a side income at some point in your life so you can own something to maybe give yourself a little bit more freedom and a little less stress, right? I mean, how many, the average American has less than $1,000 in their bank account? So I'm gonna assume I'm talking to the majority of the people here are kind of living paycheck to paycheck or just getting by, and they're trying to figure out what they need to do. But the E quadrant is where you want to start, but it's not where you want to finish. So that's the employee quadrant. We all know about it. It's nothing crazy, right? So most people want to then move into the S quadrant, which is small business or self-employed. These are general contractors. This is your local ice cream shop. This is your doctor, your attorney, your accountant maybe who works for himself. So these are guys who run small businesses, and now they're at the top of the so-called pyramid, right? Where they're making all of the money. They're in a much better tax bracket right now because the tax bracket was designed for the business owner, not for the employee. So they get a lot more write-offs. And although they're making more money in this S quadrant, what's the problem that we all see? You guys can probably guess. I don't know. When I used to work a job, I would see my boss always in the office. I come in early, he's there. I come in late, he's there. You know, he's always there. And you probably have heard the saying that he doesn't own the business owns him, right? And he doesn't maybe have the time with his friends and family and kids the way he would like it, but he's making maybe, hopefully, more of the money, not in all cases. But owning a small business is very risky. 90% of small business owners fail in the first 1 to 3 years. And then they're making what's called revenue. When someone says, oh, I'm making $1 million, most likely it's in revenue. It's not what they're netting. And based on the 2019 numbers, the average small business owner nets about $73,000 to $80,000 a year, as crazy as that sounds. So they're not making that much. So to be a successful business owner is a whole nother story than just being a business owner who stays open and is kind of just getting by. So that's being self-employed, and about 90% of the population exists either in the employee or small business owner platforms, right there, that side of the left side of the quadrant. So the biggest and most tremendous thing most people, when they find out after you watch this video, what you want to do is get to the B and I quadrants, right? The investor quadrant, we won't spend too much time on that, but it's exactly like what it sounds like. It's where you're investing enough money where you can live off your investments. It's creating compound interest for you for the future. And yes, that's where everybody wants that. That's their end game, where they're making money off their money. But big business is exactly like it says here. It's 500 employees or more, or it's $10 million in revenue or more. That's considered a big business. And if you guys have kind of learned with the PPP loans and stuff like that, they were giving money to anybody that was 500 employees or less. So that's considered small business, right? And that's how they label that. And then when it comes to big business, there's industrial age and then there's information age business structures, right? There is the industrial age, which is the brick and mortar type companies that you see. And then you have the information age companies, the Amazon.coms, the Airbnbs, the Alibabas of the world, the much larger companies who develop huge, massive assets at that no matter what explosion happens in the economy, they're probably going to make it through. Unlike a lot of the small business owners who make active income. And that's really the biggest thing I want you to take away from this is if you're on the left side of that quadrant, the E&S side, you're making what's called active income. So you're only making money when you're actively working. You're exchanging time for money on that side of the quadrant. And people on the B&I side of the quadrant are making cash flow, right? Or they're making residual income, right? Or however you want to term it, but it's income that'll keep coming in whether they're working or not. So it's just a smarter way to make money. And that's why people on the left side of the quadrant typically invest into liabilities. People on the right side of the quadrant invest into assets. So it's a different way of thinking on how they operate. Like most people may have heard, and Robert Kiyosaki talks about this a lot, if you buy a home that you live in, most people think it's an asset when it's not. It's actually a liability. And the reason why it's a liability is because anything that takes money away from you and doesn't produce money is considered a liability. Now, if you rented in your current house and you bought a home that you didn't live in, but you rented it out or you Airbnb'd that home, that would be considered an asset now because now it's cash flow, right? It's cash producing. If you have an understanding of that. So that's a good way to measure it. If you just draw a line down your income and what's an expense and what's creating money for you, most people will have all expenses and nothing creating money for them except for typically their job. And that's a good indicator for you to acknowledge that and say, wow, I should probably be doing something else on the side. And that's why me and Jamie have dedicated this podcast and this channel, if you're watching this on YouTube, whatever platform you're seeing this on or hearing this on, to get people to start to think, right? We're talking about struggle and victories because we all have that struggle story no matter where you're at. Where's your victory? That's determined up to you to win in the end. And hopefully some of this knowledge is setting off that light bulb like it did for me and my wife and saying, man, if we stay in this E quadrant for the rest of our life, we don't feel like we're going to win. It's not to say that it's a bad thing to stay in the E quadrant all life, but we didn't want that to be our end game. We wanted to transition from E to S, then to B, and then to I, which we have transitioned into all those quadrants. So it's, it's a little bit of a journey, and hopefully this is giving you kind of the first step to say, hey, you know what, let me learn more about this. But anything you want to add on that at all, babe? Or?
Yeah, well, I think now that we've gone over the cash flow quadrants of kind of like a 30,000 foot view, why don't we dive deeper into the mindset of each? Because I know a lot of people are probably thinking, okay, where do I fall in here? How do I actually get into the S quadrant or the B quadrant? And personally for me, if we talk about, the employee mindset, if we start there, I remember as an employee, I always thought I had to own my own business. I had to get into the S quadrant in order to make it, right? If you look at, your Facebook profile and the minute you start doing something, no matter what it is, I can now change my status there as self-employed and loving it. And I don't know if you guys remember, right, when you're looking at the statuses of your employment, and I was like, yes, self-employed and loving it. And so we're just kind of debunk some of the thought process around being self-employed. Yeah, owning your own business is phenomenal, but ultimately why the thought process between the E quadrant, going into the S quadrant, and how to get onto the right side of the quadrants where you can start to develop assets.
Yeah, and the biggest thing with that is the mindset I originally had coming into thinking about S quadrant. Typically, if you're in the E quadrant, you have a job, you're employed, your first thought is, I need to own 100% of something, and that's not a bad thought to own 100% of something. That just means you're moving into the S quadrant. There's good and bad things with that, right? Because now, yes, you own 100% of this company, but the bad thing is you own 100% of the company. And the reason why it's bad is because it eliminates a lot of the time and flexibility you have, because you need to be there all the freaking time. There's a lot of stress and pressure. What I had started to learn and see from certain coaches and mentors I had was, listen, I don't want to own 100% of something. I want to own a lot of little bits, right? 25% of this, 30% of that, 10% of that. And that gave them the flexibility to move and do other things and not be stuck at one spot thinking about it all the time, and really not so much be stuck in the operations in the day-to-day, and keep them to collect a lot of income. And if the world exploded and they lost 1 or 2 incomes, they would still be okay because they had 52 other incomes coming in. So it was a much smarter way of working that I never heard of. I was like, wow, that's genius, right? So moving from the E to the S, most people say, hey, I want to buy and own something, but they're limited. And the problem with most E-quadrant people like us was we didn't have capital, right, to invest. We didn't have credit, we didn't have a lot of things at that time. We didn't have the experience, the wisdom, So we were missing a lot of factors to bring to the table. Maybe you can relate, or maybe you're great with your money and you're out of debt, you have a ton of money put on the side, and you have great credit, and you're ready to dive into something.
Or hey, just because you have a skill doesn't mean that you know how to manage money or you know how to manage a business, right? So if you don't go to school for marketing, or you don't have a background in marketing, but you're a great chiropractor and you went to school for that, starting a chiropractic office, learning the business back end of that is totally different than the actual skill and expertise of being able to perform. So expertise is a huge one. Most people have expertise in a certain field, but not in everything that it takes to manage and run a business. And I love the fact that one of the things somebody told me was, when you're in the E quadrant, you have a job. When you're in the S quadrant, you own your job. And that goes back to you talking about being at your physical location 24/7, because without you, the business can't run. And that's something that small business owners fall into a lot. They become such perfectionists in the quality of the work that goes out that it's very hard for them to duplicate themselves, for them to train someone else, because there's just not enough trust. If you wanted to leave to go on vacation for 3 months out of the year, who could run your business for you? Most small business owners, sole proprietors, fall into that trap of being the only person that can do their job, and so they can't leave.
Or they don't trust to give up their job to anybody else. So real quick recap, if you're in the E quadrant, you're an employee. Main reasons why you're there: safety, security, you have active income, so you see the money quick and it's guaranteed that it's coming in because someone's giving you a check. Downside is you have no ownership, you'll never own it. And if they get shut down or decide to let you go, nothing personal, just business type of deal, then you don't take anything with you. So imagine putting 20 years in the company and them just letting you go, or being bought out by another company and being replaced. And that's something we've seen all the time. And then let's move out to the S quadrant. Independence, ownership, you have to have some competence, but the business owns you is the downside, right? So positives, you're at the top of the so-called pyramid. I don't know if you guys ever noticed before that every business, guess what, is in the shape of a pyramid, guys. So as you start to study business, you're gonna start to overcome some of these concepts of pyramid schemes or whatever thought process you have. So you're at the top of that pyramid making all the money, and all your employees are making much less than you, because that's the structure of how business works. So you're in a good spot, yes, financially, hopefully that you're profiting, right? You're actually making net income, which means positive revenue. And then you're hopefully staying in business and winning, but you usually don't have the timepiece, which is where people usually lose and why they start to think like, what else can I do to get out of this, right? You're shackled to your business. It's just a new type of prison, right? So, and not to say that, hey, some people love their business, they can be there 24/7, you love what you do, not to knock that at all for anybody listening to this, but I think most business owners, and us owning a couple of conventional businesses as well, we love them and what they do, but we don't want to be there 24/7 either. So we'd rather be venturing out to different places and working a little bit smarter, and have multiple income streams, so that way we're not locked into just one income. And you guys have probably heard the old saying, the average millionaire, which is still true to this day, has 7 sources of income coming in. So it's just something to think about if you only own one business, or if you only have one income coming in from a job or W-2 or 1099, to start to venture out to multiply that in some way, shape, or form, right? So we're gonna talk a little bit about the mindset of the I quadrant, or the investor. They're focusing on rate of return, but it requires capital. There's real estate, stocks, bonds, different things that you can focus in on. There's a million things we can go on with investments, crypto, right? The list goes on and on. So you can invest in a lot of things. You have to really know the market. You have to be educated on what's going on. You can't just dive in. The only reason why people think investing is risky is because they're not knowledgeable about what they're investing in. And they're not investing, they're gambling, right? They're going all in on black, baby. And then if it doesn't go, that's it. They lost all their money. So they have to be educated on that. So that's really important that they do that. And that's where experience needs to be gained. They should seek out counsel before they do anything as far as investments, or a coach or mentor if they have one. Let's move into B quadrant, because that's really a big one for us, and I believe where people need to be focused on both, right? You don't want to be over leveraged in just one. If you guys study the wealth of entrepreneurs, the whoever you want to focus in on in the world, they usually have B and I in their quadrants, right? So let's understand, why do they have that, right? So the reason why B, the mindset, is wealth building, right? Now there's 2 different types of wealth building, where we kind of talked a little bit about the industrial and information age. But the biggest thing with having a big business is, if you guys can think about the show Shark Tank, right? Because we've all seen the show. People approach the sharks, right? The Mark Cubans of the world, and they approach that show in really a small business, right? Because they're not at the $10 million revenue marker yet, or 500 employees. And what they're trying to evaluate, these people on the show pitching them, is they're trying to evaluate what type of system do they have in place so I can scale that company now from a small business to a big business. And that's the reason why most companies that are running as a small business will never be able to become a big business, because it's not scalable to that level. There's no system put in place. And when an entrepreneur is evaluating a business, it's not evaluating it on the product or service, where most people focus on. I mean, how guilty are we all? Like, someone brings up a business idea. What's the product? What's the service? The first two things we ask, when that's really irrelevant. And that's why, if you think about Shark Tank, if the product or service mattered, why is everybody pitching different product and services in different industries? And it's because it doesn't matter. That's why they don't care about that. They're trying to identify,
is it scalable?
Is it scalable? Can I grow this company? Do I trust this person I'm working with to work their ass off, right? Because guess what? Mark Cuban's investing money. Think about it. I talked about this earlier. He's investing money. Is Mark Cuban going to be doing the day-to-day operations there? Hell no. So what does Mark Cuban have? A lot of little bits, right? All those sharks have a lot of little bits coming in. They don't want to be doing the day-to-day operations there, and they have the money to do that. They become investors, right? Where they can invest in businesses and grow big business models from it. So that's where they're doing two at the same time. So it's a much more different way and a different perspective of how people view and evaluate businesses, where now they start to evaluate business structures and business systems, and not so much on the product. Because you could have the best product in the world, but if nobody knows about it and it's not scalable, and it doesn't have what's called a proof of concept, where it's not winning in the market, it hasn't made a certain amount of money, it hasn't gotten into other people's hands to tell where the value was, then you don't know if it's going to be successful or not. So there's certain things to evaluate a business. And we're bringing this up because as people maybe decide to pick up maybe the book CASHFLOW Quadrant by Robert Kiyosaki, or Rich Dad Poor Dad, or really any book that goes over this information, the wheels in your head are going to start going, and you're going to be like, man, I can do this and that business. So you'll start Googling stuff. But what you want to view is, how can I scale this company? Also, another way to think about this is red versus blue ocean, right? There's something called a red ocean, which is a shark-infested water. So it's a market that is heavily saturated. Everybody's doing the same thing. So what can I bring to this market that's different from everybody else, and bring it from a red ocean into what we call the blue ocean, which is clear sailing, where you can start to profit and maybe nobody can match you or catch up to you, like what Tesla has done, right? Tesla created a blue ocean. He took a saturated market, the car market, did something nobody thought was possible, created the electric car, and then just created, he smoked everybody. And even now, while companies are trying to create other electric cars, they can't catch him because his technology is too far ahead, and his brand recognition to just own a Tesla, just the name, I drive a Tesla, right? There's just something about it that, even that YouTube video where he built the new truck, and it was a total fail. He breaks the glass, it didn't work, and now everybody wants it. It doesn't even matter what he does. Even when it's wrong, he's still right. And he created a blue ocean for himself. It's kind of crazy. And it's just something to think about. So when you're diving into a side hustle, a business, anything that you're thinking about, how can I go from red ocean to blue ocean? Because chances are, whatever you come up with, there's probably a lot of people doing it already, and that's okay. But stuff to think about how you can separate yourself and what you're going to do different. What I want to leave you with is, you get paid on the value that you bring to the market. So you get to determine your own wealth by the value that you bring to the market. Now, what does that mean? If you're interviewing at a job, they're evaluating on a position. Why should I pay you? What value you bring to this company? But when you're going into business, you have to say, what value am I bringing to that market, whatever it is that you're selling, or product or service that you're bringing to the table. And the only way to bring more value is to study, get educated, learn what market you're getting into, and find out what solution, what problem are you going to solve for an individual or a business. Right? What problem am I solving? Because if you're not solving a problem, nobody's going to pay for it. Right? And hopefully we brought some value to you guys today. And hopefully we solved a couple of problems and brought a solution to you of saying, hey man, I'm in that E, I'm in that S. I got to start getting myself educated a little more, start diving into some more information. And guess what? We have a ton of other videos like this, guys. So if you want to search other stuff, that's about it. We will see you guys next time.
Bye.